This room hasn't changed much in the last 10 years. I guess we cleaned it up a little bit. Soon-Hwa sat here in this audience just as you did 10 years ago, right?
Yes, 10 years.
We did renovate a little bit, and word is we may get a new space next year. We don't know. But anyway, I'm really happy to have her here. I feel it's reciprocal. I was invited to Singapore to lecture and judge their students 3 years ago, which was really a terrific trip, and I was treated well there. I wish I could reciprocate. But Soon-Hwa is the sort of head of the photographic initiatives at Singapore's major university, working with a team of creative people in all aspects of design, film, marketing, all the things that this school is about in the midst of a bigger technology university. They have a building enough to make anybody jealous. It has hallways wider than this room, and spaces for people to work, sing, display. It's quite remarkable. At any rate, just give you a little background. Soon-Hwa is from Korea, teaches in Singapore, speaks French, Korean, English, what else? That's enough. And was an outstanding student here, and at the same time was working on a PhD and has a doctorate in education from Columbia University. Now that's some energy. And she has a young child, happily married, who travels all over the world, photographs, and does all the things that she's supposed to do herself. She's going to tell us about 3 recent projects. She's an intrepid traveler in China, India, and a book she's working on about creative image making in Indonesia. So, with no further ado, Soon-Hwa.
Thank you, Charlie, for kind introduction. It is true, I'm a student here, sitting here in this room, 1998. The first day, Charlie said something, I still remember. He said, you guys should be very lucky to have this opportunity. And anyone in the world would be jealous of you to be able to study at School of Visual Art and a photo program. At that time, I didn't understand what that meant, actually. I said, there got to be better place than this also. And or maybe he's a bit exaggerating. Then I graduated. It's been 12 years. And I've been going a lot of schools in the world, the UK and Europe and Asia. And I truly believe this is one of the best schools in the world. It's based on my experience. Okay, so I want to show you today 3 of my recent projects. I studied here at School of Visual Art, actually stayed in New York City for a decade. And while I was studying at Columbia University, I missed the hands-on work. So I talked to the chair of the Columbia University and can I get a studio in the school? And she said, no, this is a place you read and write. You don't make work here. So I got very disappointed. So I came to the School of Visual Art where I can actually have some room to breathe, meaning to make work. So during the weekdays, I was at Columbia University. Weekends, nights, I was in the lab, dark room. So this was one of my sanctuary place. And currently I live and work in Singapore since 2005, and I try to continue to work on my photographic work while I'm teaching and also publishing in articles and journals. All my project actually relates to my personal experience. And I'm interested in the project that speaks directly to the human experience. In my photographic work, I often rely on my own first-hand experience and observation that serves my project idea. And today I'm going to share with you a few of my recent projects that I created since 2008. And those are, one is Quiet Dreams in Vietnam. Two, second one is Indonesian contemporary photography. That is actually academic research work, not the photography work. And the third one is Deep Price. It's done in India just recently, a couple months ago, December 2012. So first one is Quiet Dream. As Charlie introduced, I'm originally from South Korea. I've been living out of the country since 2004, nearly 19 years now. I don't feel like I'm that old. At my last family visit, 2005, I noticed a growing population of Vietnamese women migrating to the southern rural area of South Korea. So I landed at the airport in Incheon and got a car and driving down to the south. And I saw these banners in the middle of nowhere in the mountain. In the highway, I noticed Vietnam Bride, and there is a mobile phone number. Then I was wondering, who's going to stop the car in the middle of highway and take down the number and look for bride? And it got me curious. So I started making some research, newspaper, the usual thing, online, Google newspaper, and ask people around. And also I happened to go to supermarket. I saw a lot of young Vietnamese women making grocery shopping. So I started very curious to find out how the Vietnamese bride adjust their life in this homogeneous society of Korea, with the Korean language barrier, family culture, and social stigma. That's because for a long time I myself tried to understand, deal with these issues when marrying a foreigner. My husband is French and his grandmother is Vietnamese. For me, I left my home country, found an ideal place for us. I couldn't deal with it. So that was Singapore. From my perspective, I saw this woman growing. I immediately got interested in these Vietnamese women in Korea. What choices that they have made living their home country, what experience they have in their new life, dreams, and expectations. So I contacted Korean families through city hall and community center, but social stigma prohibited these newlywed women to speak to outsiders. It was quite impossible to gain access to Vietnamese women in Korea. Then I had to go back to Singapore. From there, I met some contacts with my friends in Vietnam. Luckily, I hired someone to be my local translator. She happened to be majored in journalism. Now she is one of the important journalists in a major newspaper in Vietnam. So she told me these girls are mostly from Mekong Delta area, which is economically one of the poorest regions in Vietnam. And then I found this small island called Thanh Lạc, which locals indicated that many girls from that island had married to foreigners. So hence it was nicknamed as Taiwan Island. So past 2 to 3 years, I have visited, photographed in that island every 6 months. At each my visit, I stayed in a local house. That allowed me to get to know their family life. The conditions of living was quite difficult. I was bitten by mosquitoes severely. I felt comfortable with the community of the people on the island. They gradually opened up their minds. They shared their personal story of having sent their daughters away to Korea or Taiwan. They allowed me to photograph in their houses and helped me to create some panoramic shots by posing in front of my camera. Some of the images are staged, but they are not completely fictional. So in these images, this is a young woman who is about to marry to a Korean, and the mothers are coming from traditional mothers, Vietnamese mother, and other social problems emerge. And those young Vietnamese boys or young men who's heartbroken by losing their girlfriends gets into the alcohol problems and drug problems. So there's AIDS problems emerging in this small island. So these selected photographs were created mainly on the island with the families who wish their daughters to marry foreigners or who had already daughters in foreign countries. In documentation of the people and the place in this island, I intended to gain an in-depth understanding why these young women make such decisions. While working on this island, my initial misconception of the international marriage changed. Actually, these families are well aware of the difficulties that the daughters might face, but they also believe the tragic case is 1 out of 10. They just hope their daughter is not going to be the one. And often you can, a common arrangement is that the husband family would send $100 per month to the bride's home to help out the Vietnamese family. And the impact of receiving such help is significant. If you see it, this house is quite big and solid. It's not like a hut. So this family has already daughters who married foreigners. So they were able to buy this house, which cost about $10,000. And those houses next to it were like small huts, where each family they did not receive any foreign help. So the project was made to provide some background information about Vietnamese women, the areas that they come from, the living conditions, and the communities they have lived up and living their own country. I started this project by doing what I do well, like just the individual portrait work, like what you saw earlier. And then I realized that doesn't really offer much information for the audience to actually understand who this woman is and what they were about. So I started including more background information, where they come from, the communities that they live. This house, now it doesn't exist anymore, but that house was under the French colonial times. The French officers used to live there. So this country has been occupied. There was a French occupation, there's Americans, now it's left up to the people. So you can see by landscapes the historical influences they created. Arranged marriage with foreigners is illegal now. So if anyone is caught, can be arrested. So you will see, I actually saw it in the island, and a small minivan would come early in the morning before the sunrise. Then all these girls will quickly get into the minivan, and then the driver will drive this woman to the Saigon, which is actually a city about 8 hours from this island. And the competition is quite steep. These women actually want to marry. They are not forced. They are not being sold by marriage. And they are willing to take the risk, and they want to go. So they are investing in it. They are paying for this themselves. The competition is 1 against 200. One man gets to see 200 women that day. So it takes about 2 to 3 days. And this woman will pay for everything, all the expenses, until she finds the husband. Once she finds the husband will actually reimburse all the expenses to the agent. But until then, they are paying for it. And now I think the regulation has been much tightened. In Taiwan, the bride has to actually pass the language test before they marry, and otherwise they cannot get a visa. In Korea, we take certain measurement. There's government initiations helping this woman, but there is other problems. The second generations of Vietnamese, Korean, not doing very well in the society or at schools. So that creates that Americans very well know that multiculturalism. You you have people coming outside, and suddenly you have to learn this new culture and everything. So all these works are done in large format camera. So I wanted to actually build the stories so viewers can actually understand the community where these women are coming from. So I use these panoramic stitch shots. So these are consist of 3 to maybe 7 images, depending on the frame. That is more like southern tip of Vietnam, which is back borders with Cambodia. So I create this image to actually to thinking of the audience in Korea, because I hear a lot of tragic stories about Vietnamese women getting depressed, they suicide, they are being abused and maltreated. So how do we actually use visual images to educate people? One way doing it is instead of trying to actually maybe provide someone information where they come from and their life gets more contextualized instead of just focusing on the process of the marriage itself. One of the reviewers, portfolio reviewers, told me my picture, there's not enough sex in it, so I must actually create such a thing. I said, that's exactly what I want to avoid. I don't want to nurture such a things. I want to nurture some more positive energy, change the perception, how we see these women. This is the Vietnamese work. I have shown this work in many different places in South Korea. I think people find it a bit difficult to deal with it, maybe too real, too close to makes people uncomfortable. So I have no problem doing it in Europe and Australia and other places, even in the States. But in Korea, I never succeed to show it. So what I would like to address is multiculturalism is an old idea for, I think, at least for Americans, because we already dealt with it for a long time. But for Koreans, multiculturalism is not about imposing minority to learn the dominant culture, but for majority to gain some knowledge about minorities' culture. So hopefully this image will inform some of the beautiful, loving life that these women had before they came to Korea. And we cannot really, the children of these women do not feel like their mother's heritage is any inferior to the Korean ones. So the next project that I've been working on is contemporary photography from Indonesia. So I completed my study at SBA with the real encouragement of many teachers here, Charlie, Sarah Transworth, and lots of people. Then I moved to Singapore. Once I finished this project and MFA program, I actually changed my dissertation topic. I threw away a year of work, literature review at Columbia University. One day I went to my advisor and said, this is not what I want. I said, before it gets late, why don't you change it? I said, okay, I changed it. So I worked on the artist and dealer relationship, which was what probably what some of you want to know, to be able to continue and working as an artist. So I interviewed artists and dealers, and I wrote a dissertation, I finished it. Later I published the book. Then I found this job in Singapore right after I graduated, and because of the subject of my photography, I thought geographically it was perfect for me to go. So I packed and left for Singapore. A lot of people warned me it's going to be very boring, which some part is true, but I was buried in work for past 6 years. I really haven't seen the sky actually. So when I started teaching photography in 2005 in Singapore, now I have to think differently. I have to wear different hats. I searched for some of the written documents on South Asian photographers' work in South Asia, but most of materials I found were written by Western scholars and photographers during colonial times. And as a matter of fact, Indonesia was occupied by Dutch for 300 years. Singapore was occupied by British, and so was Malaysia. Only mid-60s and the neighboring countries gained their independence. So it was difficult to teach students. I actually mainly showed a lot of your teacher's work in my class. And me, I learned from American photographers. I brought this material to Singapore. I was teaching what George Stonefeld, Stephen Shore, and all other photographers were documenting, and I was showing to my students. And there was a huge gap. Then I realized it's really necessary to actually develop some new materials that our students could relate to. So I searched and interviewed some of the photographers around Indonesia. So this is not artistic work, this is academic research. I interviewed artists, young artists work. Some are young and some are unknown. Actually, contemporary art photography is very infantile stage in Indonesia, because first there's no contemporary photography school, but then we live in an internet age, so these artists are relatively well informed. So I want to show you the video first, and we can discuss.
Kebetulan salah satu generasi yang ada di dunia antara analog dan digital. Karena saya melihat misalkan pada zaman melukis, seniman mempunyai power untuk membentuk image-nya sendiri, dari tidak ada menjadi ada, dari ada menjadi tiada. Misalnya ketika kita menggambar pemandangan, tapi di situ ada pohon dan kita tidak mau pohon itu ada, the artist can easily remove it. Atau adding, jadi seniman bisa menambahkan, misalnya kalau pohonnya kurang banyak. Nah, di zaman era digital ini, kemungkinan atau kekuatan seniman tersebut bisa diadakan kembali. Major yang tadi saya sebut real unreal dan power tentang seniman yang bisa meng-create, dan teknologi digital itu adalah triangle yang bisa menjadi satu kesatuan dalam karya saya.
Karena menurut saya panorama adalah salah satu frame yang unik di fotografi, dia spesifik. Terus saya gunakan konsep panorama itu untuk menggabungkan snapshot saya digital dengan hasil scan saya cetak foto. Jadi perkawinan atau pertemanan antara analog dan digital itu sangat erat sekali di project contemporary photography series saya.
Development of the digital era. That's one of the big because the new technology of that it is very good for photography, and especially for the documentary film and also the photojournalism area. It's more effective if you use the digital.
Beruntung sekali dengan sekarang adanya teknologi digitalisasi sekarang seperti ini, bahwa digitalisasi memudahkan saya untuk berkreativitas, untuk membuat sesuatu hal yang berbeda. Nah, disinilah ketertarikan saya pada digital. Saya semakin bebas untuk mengeluarkan apa yang ada di dalam hati saya. Kegalauan, kegelisahan, keinginan atau imajinasi yang akan saya keluarkan di sini. Terus kemudian dengan digitalisasi ini adalah membuat sesuatu hal yang baru. Fotografi selalu berpikir jelas, selalu berpikir masa lalu. Nah, saya akan membuat sesuatu hal, bukan bahwa fotografi selalu berpikir mendokumentasi saja, tetapi membuat sebuah karya. Saya membuat sebuah karya ini adalah pada sisi yang berbeda. Sehingga satu sisi bahwa di dalam dunia fotografi selalu berpikir, dengan adanya digitalisasi memudahkan saya untuk berkreativitas, berimajinasi, mengungkapkan konsep, mengungkapkan ide sesuai dengan keinginan saya dengan cara digitalisasi. Jadi digitalisasi sangat memudahkan saya untuk membuat sebuah karya.
Jadi foto itu atau kamera itu adalah alat yang mahal. Dia hanya dimiliki oleh orang tertentu. Artinya motret dengan roll film itu adalah kemewahan 30 tahun yang lalu. Seiring dengan kemajuan teknologi foto digital, ada dalam kamera, ada dalam telepon seluler, kamera digital, ada perubahan yang sangat drastis bahwa pada dasarnya semua orang adalah fotografer.
That time saya melihat bahwa itu jadi problem karena menjadi fotografer itu sangat mudah, tetapi konten tidak melulu bagus gitu. Artinya bahwa dia bisa melakukan apa yang dilakukan oleh apa yang dihasilkan oleh fotografer profesional, tapi belum tentu secara konten dia mempunyai value yang sama dengan apa yang dilakukan oleh seniman profesional atau fotografer.
Fotografi adalah alat mekanis. Jadi apalagi sekarang di era digital, fotografi sangat mudah untuk dibuat orang dengan kamera yang serba otomatis, dengan sangat mudah membuat foto yang secara teknis hasilnya bagus. Tetapi pelan-pelan dengan adanya perkembangan seni kontemporer, kelihatannya mulai bisa diterima fotografi sebagai karya seni. Karena orang akhirnya mulai belajar juga ternyata ada perbedaannya antara foto-foto yang umum dan foto-foto yang disebut fine art atau karya seni foto. Yaitu tadi pijakan membuat karya itu yang berbeda.
The era digital is still countable as analog. They're working more with the concept. The concept is when you take when you make some photos or something, you must have concept. But for me, it's better when you have the content. This is what is that. That's it. Much better is you have the content. Content is because it comes from yourself. You talk about your experience. That is the which concept, content, context. Not many photographers in Indonesia talk about three, what I say before, concept, content, context. Yeah.
There was Nico who actually worked in Germany for the past 30 years as a commercial photographer, and now he's back to Indonesia. He was fairly unknown even in Indonesia. There was not like galleries not yet developed, and the network is not there yet. So it was a big challenge to find all these hidden photographers, but their work was quite strong. I'm planning to actually work on a book that consists of like about 30 to 40 photographers, some from Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore. So that's going to serve as a reference for other curators, because at the moment they all call me, could you recommend photographers for such a show? There is a growing interest in Southeast Asian photographic works. So so that it might be actually much more accessible and to share this information with others. So that's going to hopefully finish by next year, have a book coming out of it. So the next of my work is it's my own work, back to my own work. So that is also my work, but I actually did that is also social studies. In 2008, I was given an opportunity to stay in an international artist residency place named the Sanskrit Foundation in New Delhi. If anyone is interested, that is a beautiful place to go. Very supportive of artists. So my residency was supported by Sanskrit Pianos Arts Council Korea. I'm a mother because I have full-time job, so I have to really block certain period of time per year to focus on my own work. If I don't do it, I feel depressed. So I usually use my holiday time to just go away. So I don't have to extend. So during 3 weeks stay in India, in December 2008, I produced about 35 portrait photographs. This series reveals my daily interaction with people from both religious groups, Muslims and Hindus in Varanasi. The portrait included Muslim Baba, a Bengal Kanga, rickshaw driver, Hindu priest. And this Muslim family that I visited, the woman whose face is covered, she didn't want actually. Her son, who is only 6 years old, he protested against. So he wouldn't let her mother show her face in front of the camera. He cried too hard, so we had to cover her face. It wasn't her will, it was the son's. And the people in the photographs are strangers who simply welcome me to their living space, and that hesitation allowed me to record their most private space as well as their family. Each photograph was taken within 1 to 2 hours interaction with the individuals. Each of them explains their views about Hindu, Muslim culture, their faith, religion, architecture, rituals through their daily activities. So this was a way for me to actually learn the new place, the people. India, I had this opportunity, but I wasn't sure that what I could do there. So I just went out and photographed. That was my first attempt doing street photography. That's not only what I would do. After I have done this work, toward the end of this project, and I actually found what I really want to work. There was Muslim weavers in Varanasi. I think this is somebody who is from India. Varanasi is Hindu's most sacred place in India. And when I first went there, I thought, oh, I will see a lot of Hindus, not really thinking about Muslim populations there. But right behind Ganga, there's this pockets of Muslim communities, really tucked away. And 95% of these people are engaged in sari, silk sari. Varanasi sari is very well known in India. They were mostly used for special occasions or weddings. You must have this Varanasi sari for marriage, wedding occasions. So that was around the time there was a Mumbai bomb attack, and a lot of interest was created. And also for me, working in Singapore, which is also multicultural environment, we have 60% of Chinese, and then Malay, and Muslims, and others like the expatriates or Westerners who moved to Singapore. So I actually had to really work with this Muslim culture and learn their culture, habits, and behaviors of people. So I thought that this is one way for me to understand different cultures. So I set up a project to go back and to actually understand, to focus on Muslim weavers in Varanasi. So that was just December 2012. I spent another 3 weeks in Varanasi working on photography projects as well as my first attempt video. So my third artistic project is a Sleep Rise, which actually this family inspired me. And this is a weaver's family. It's outside. I don't know if anyone read the fiction called The White Tiger. Anybody read the book, White Tiger? If you haven't read, have interest in India, that is exactly the background of the book is coming from this place where I photographed. That book was very popular in 2008, and I read it again this time and actually realized that I was working exactly in the same location as the author was describing the main character. So it was even more exciting. So the woman in the middle, I worked with her like an hour to make her to look at me or straight to my camera. That's what I used to do, what I used to know of woman. But she wouldn't and she couldn't, because it's the first time she's posing in front of camera. So for me to insisting on her itself was very insensitive. And and I wasn't aware of it, the differences. So once I went back, I thought, oh, I don't have picture here. I made all the way out of the city, the trip, 1 hour, 2 hours on the motorbike, and I didn't get the picture. And when I saw contact rings, I actually realized that that's the way she's showing herself. I was imposing the way I expected women to behave. That was different. So I set up a project as Muslim weavers in Varanasi for the steep price, and I got the little funding. Anytime I have project idea, I apply for funding. If you have money, it's makes life easier. So I actually do it habitually. I don't know if anyone gave you advice. When I was student here, I said, I think one of the teachers said, so what are you going to do after graduate? Oh, I want to be an artist. People, my art? I said, nobody do that. Oh, okay. So that was a wake-up call. Then since then, I've been spending a lot of time also searching for funding and some sort of a support system out there in society, in the world. So in Varanasi, over 90% of Muslims are engaged in sari business. Varanasi silk sari has been always a luxury side for marriage or special occasion. But in this modernized world, the demand for silk sari is decreasing. It is not only to promote silk sari, but weaving knowledge actually could be preserved and actually should be preserved and adapted for other high demand of textile design or for luxurious international brand growth. For instance, like these are the weavers. The man on the glasses closing eye, he is the master weaver. The rest are the weavers who work for him. But each weavers are from head of the family. So each family, each man has family members of 10 to 20 in their house. And they are also working. So this weaver has 80 weavers, master weaver has 80 weavers, means he has almost 800 people working for his huge company. I was just saw one man I wanted to photograph. Within 10 minutes, everyone came out. As I said, I was just focusing on one person. Always I find a group of people walking in and typing on, and they were all sitting. India is, I think, it's famous for photographers. So this is some of the photographs I took it working in the Muslim neighborhood. I have habits of waking up very early to work, just to observe what people are doing. Very early in the morning, I would wake up 4 in the morning and walk around the neighbors. And 5 in the morning, I found this Muslim, this gym in the neighborhood, and these boys were very happy. Woman photographer has a limit. You cannot carry much because you have to be physically strong to carry equipment. The woman photographer has also the advantage over man. It gets me where men cannot go because they let their guard down because I'm a woman. Secondly, I'm Asian. It gets me into Muslim community much better than some of you guys because of the political. So I use it. I take that as my advantage to work. So these are the weavers who make the products, the brocade for Dalai Lama. He comes to this master weaver's house to order brocade. And Hermes comes, Kenzo comes, and these are the weavers who make those fancy textiles. And actually, the master weaver I work with, he was hired for silk scarf that goes to the gift shop and Victoria and Albert Museum. So the weavers actually show me all this process and they show me this tag, the Victoria Albert Museum, and what they have to do when those weavers bring the silk textile, they just attach the tag and it goes to England. And it's being sold for like 100 times more than they actually make. So Muslims specifically distinguish the key for their labor work. I like to understand the culture and the community from woman's perspective. But if I try to stop women in the street, they get really furious with me. You can't talk to women, strangers. I have found the ways. You gotta talk to the community leader first. The community leader says to everyone, she's okay, and I can get into the neighborhood. And then once I get into the neighborhood, I can talk to the family head. The family head will actually talk to the woman, and if she's okay to come in. And when they say okay, I can go actually to the second floor. Men's place is the level 1, woman's place is the level 2 upstairs. One of the Hindu businessmen who actually worked with Muslim widows for the past 30 years, he said, Soon-Hwa, what you're going to do is impossible. You can't go upstairs. He said, worked with this man for 30 years. I get invited to his house, but never seen his daughter. So I said, okay, I tried, and somehow it works. So this woman, immediately, I actually felt a bit invasive for what I did in some ways. This is her living room, a bedroom where she works. And when I entered the room, and she immediately hid herself behind the curtain, she wouldn't come out until I disappeared. And the mother-in-law insisted that I was okay to be there. So men were usually engaged in the weaving and physically more strenuous, and women's work is embroidery and finishing the textile. Muslim weavers actually works all day, nearly 15 hours, makes barely enough to feed their family. So in that case, not only he himself works, but also his wife, children, anyone over age about 10 are engaged in the work. And children usually finish their education maybe grade 5. And they don't go to school because I think partially the quality of education is not there. So they don't feel that they know anything. One of the young men I interviewed, he said, when I weave, there's food on the table. I read, there's no food. So why should I go to school? And some of the Western NGOs raised the issue of child abuse in Muslim weavers. So this control comes, and they check on this condition if children are engaged in work. But in fact, from this family's perspective, all the children's father and grandfather, son and grandchildren, they just sit together and weave all day. They actually know how those techniques are transferred orally. The young ones train. In some ways, it's not different than 15th century Renaissance guild system where the master artists train the younger ones. That is the hand room where the children at the corner they study there. They're reading out loud Arabics. We've for 70 years now out of job. So most of weavers who's out of job actually are engaged in construction work where their earnings are 3 times more than weaving itself. I'd like to show you a video of these weavers, the process of sewing. Sound is quite bad because I have edited. I did it in December. I quickly edited to show you the process of sewing.
फोटोग्राफी है कई लोग सब हम सीख रहे हैं बच्चा वहाँ पर भी और इनसे सीख रहे हैं ये चीज़ है कभी आप तो आपको डर मिल जाएगा हम लोग को हम भी जानते हैं
Charlie to give me this opportunity because you guys are not a critical audience. So I thought I could use some feedback from you guys.
Well, don't all be shy.
I think students only in Singapore they are shy, not at SVA if I remember.
I'll put someone on the spot. So, you're from India. What do you think of the Varanasi
Yeah.
pieces?
I want to know when you are photographing them, I totally get what you mean by wanting to focus on one person and then suddenly you're like photographing 50 people. So, but then what did you tell them that you were taking pictures for? Like, was there some kind of dialogue that you explained to them what you were doing?
For this steep
For the
rise,
Varanasi, yeah.
Varanasi ones, I told them I'm interested in this Muslim community, and especially the Sari, the Uyghurs, the process that they were doing in their life, their ordinary life. So that was the study point. But I think it was, for me, this group was particularly interesting because I could understand the Muslim culture, their religious practice, how they govern their daily life, and also the amount of secrecy that went around this business. If you are not Muslim, almost impossible to actually get into this business. So some of the Hindus actually convert to Muslim and to be in this business, and vice versa. Some of the Muslims, when they want to work for the Hindu family, they actually convert or they pretend they were Hindus. So if you read that book, there's a couple of books written about these Varanasi weavers. So those are interesting aspects of it.
Did you find there was different, I mean, in Indonesia, and I mean, what kind of differences did you
I think the Indonesian Muslim is very different than Malay, Asia, also Indian, because Indonesia, there's probably second largest population, but it's not Muslim state. They have democracy there. But in Malaysia, as Muslim law, they have to live by this religious government. So these are all different. If you go to Indonesia, girls are very liberal. They wear tank tops and jeans, and they might have tudung, but they have all kinds of liberal, more moderate actually, Muslim practice. Whereas in Indonesia, if they don't wear veil, it's not against the law, but they will get harassed in the street. So they actually can't wear it. So I think Muslim in general, what we know is different than depending on the places.
You said that a lot of the scarves and things were sold to companies like Hermes and like Victoria and Albert Museum.
Yeah.
And so I assume that they're sold for like a fraction of the price, right? Like the weavers make them for almost. How aware are the weavers of what they're being used for? Do you know what I mean? Like the huge discrepancy.
Yeah, that's actually that's the point of my film. Actually, I actually discovered by doing it. All I wanted, my interest initially was the Muslim, that the community itself, how this woman were actually maybe oppressed. That was my initial projection to it, just knowing from the news and the literature. But once I went there, all other things, the globalization, the market price was much more interesting. So I said that there's master weavers. Master weaver has a lot of weavers, and these weavers are not aware of anything. Actually, they have also their family members working for this house, and that house works for the master weavers. Master weaver is the connection actually between the West and the East. So master weavers is the businessmen. They are extremely rich. They are very well off, but not necessarily they are going to share their wealth with other weavers. And this weaver will work with usually merchant, who comes to Metropolitan Museum to sell this very same scarf that I interviewed the man actually. So he comes to New York City, go to different museums, shows the samples, and the museum they like it and they will order. So they take the order. Museum will send the patterns. I hope you. I guess it's okay to talk about this. Would that hurt their business? I'm just thinking. Okay. we're artists, so we should be able to talk about it. So medium weave sand, they see the quality of it. It's all handmade. You know what you saw in the video. All handmade. Museum sometimes they will usually send the patterns, and the master weaver is the one who knows how to set the card. That is the art. That is actually need intelligence to set the card and designing it. So he will set the machine. The weaver is just doing the labor work. And usually the percentage, about 15%, the merchant will take. The rest gives to the master weaver, and master weaver distribute, and then he distribute to his weavers. The head of the family will actually pay even his wife for the labor work, all entire family members. So Muslim women actually they get the wage from husband. When they get married, if you can weave or not, that determines the value of the bride as well. So that's how it works. Yeah. So the master weaver is the point. In some ways, he works with the ones that I know. Often I met several the master weavers, and they work with the Hindu merchants who actually goes to Europe or New York, comes here to actually do the business setup. So Kenzo comes as well. Yeah.
A question that I learned recently, and I don't know that this is the case in the beginning of the silk that industry in their nursery, but it was actually in a different part where it was the marble designers. And what I heard, and it could not be true, I mean, it might possibly not be true, but that because the woman would actually marry into another family, what the woman knows is really limited, because the family wants to control their craft, whether it's weaving or stonework or any of the crafts that they actually make. So when a woman goes off to another family, they don't want her taking that information to another family, which would therefore make money.
So
in
the
competition between families or
between the families. So that all actually calculated into the marriage rate.
into the marriage, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I actually went to the madrasa, the religious school, which is very conservative religious school in Varanasi. I had one picture that you saw it, the Muslim man feeding fish in Ganga, the back of the Muslim man. So that picture I made a postcard. Instead of me going, I'm an artist, I like to interview you, it's like, it doesn't work, it takes like ages and they don't take it seriously. So I just bring this kind of postcard. If I want to work with the Muslim community, I put in one picture, I said, I make this last year, I want to make more of this. Can I come in? He said, okay. So I got into my place, into the men's place, then I wanted to go, can I go to the girls' school? He said, no. He said, I really want to go and see it. I said, okay, you can go, but no camera. I said, okay, how about sound? Said, no sound, no machinery allowed. Then I said, okay. Then this translator who came with me, the headmaster would step out, and there was security guard sitting there. I didn't think he spoke English. So he was watching us, but we didn't understand. We didn't think he would understand us speaking English. They said, oh, Soon-Hwa, just bring this one. He prepared the machine and give me, put in your purse and just get in. Okay, I said, no. With that illegally acquired that footage, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Later, I don't want to be in trouble and etc. So I said, no, we won't negotiate in 10 minutes. I had this, like, should I do it? It's my last chance. Then I said, no, I can't do it. So I didn't. The moment I said, no, I don't want to take the machine, and the man was watching us. He understood what we were doing. He said, now time to go, you can come. My heart dropped. If I said, yes, I'll take the machine, and they would have searched me at the entrance and kicked me out of the community. And that's, community is very tight. So you are banned, that means you can't go near the street even. Really, there's a dog everywhere. If my local guide got bitten by dog, so the dog will bark if they see any strangers. It's that kind of tight community there. So I went in, and I couldn't get any footage, but most amazing things that I witnessed. Students sit like it is much closer, tight on the knee, on the floor. There's a teacher in front and behind the veil. In between student and teacher, there's a veil. So the man sits there, the male teacher there, and then there's a curtain. All the female students is here. Behind that curtain, there's a construction workers. So they do anything they could do to actually, to comply with the religious rules. But then I thought it was the most amazing things. And there's many classrooms, entire open space, like 4 classrooms like that, and students sitting, 35 students each areas, and they were sitting all the female students. So that I saw it. I wish I had taken any images, but that's only right now. If you have any more questions.
I have one. I mean, obviously, the thread in all your work is basically human rights, female rights in particular, except the Indonesian project, which really also is about a certain thread of coming into awareness of craft, of production, and all these things. But in the earlier work, in the work of the Vietnamese women who are going to marry Koreans, you show them in their sort of idealized wedding gowns and an environment which, I guess, in a way, we know what's to come. But have you thought about maybe photographing the real life in Korea post this
Yes.
dream?
Yeah. That's what I'm going to be doing this December. Yeah.
You're going to Korea.
Yeah.
The reality versus the dream.
That's actually, I tried, it didn't work because, as a photographer, gaining access is like 80% of your work is done already. Because now camera is good, you press, there's nice picture comes out. You have to actually sculpt your project nicely. So gaining access in Korea was impossible. I was harassed by this man, Korean man. Yeah, and I even tried to use this political system that I know through the community center and city hall, gained all the statistics where they lived and everything. So I obtained this information. I approached them with the help of those community centers, but still the families know because in many cases this woman comes to Korea. Now they're young women, they know the internet and everything, so they meet up with another Vietnamese guy, they run away. Whereas Korean men invested like $20,000 to bring her. So they don't want any outsiders. That creates problem because then they are isolated, more isolated. They have no access to the communication. But past 5 years, that was like 2008 when I wanted to do it. Now things are much more improving, much more open, and there's a lot of success stories. So it might get a bit easier for me to go back and try to do it there. And I actually got to know more women who married a Korean man. They are in Korea. The mothers gave me address to go check on the family, and so I might ask actually to gain access to it.
What the Korean men who married these women what are their backgrounds? What are their economics?
So
they still have to have some money. They're investing a lot of money.
They are investing a lot of money, but they are mainly low socioeconomic background. Yeah, below poverty level. Yeah. So that's and in Korea there was a lot of abortions. So there's simply not enough women. Yeah. Because male, the boy preference, that's the result in a lot of Asian countries we face. Even in Singapore as well.
Other questions?
Yes. You were mentioning a few times that you work with translators.
Speak up, Michelle.
Oh, sorry. You were mentioning that you work with translators a few times, and I was wondering how you found your translators. Are they just people to translate your intentions towards the group that you want to work with, or do they actually have a background that is close to the group?
No, they have absolutely no background. I like the street smart people, so I will ask some of the people that I know. Do you know like this younger age who is interested in photography where I can help in some ways, and also they like to gain some first-hand experience. So often it's journalism students or students in photography, and So those people, they're willing to learn, actually do extra miles of work. If I hire a professional translator, they want to take a break, they need lunch break, tea break, and they're too expensive, I can't afford. So I feed them well, treat them well, but they work very hard. So at some point, I had to change translator. He couldn't keep up with me. So I said, okay, you go home, second one comes. So every 10 days, I change, actually.
The reason why I ask is because that I found when I go to do a project where I don't have access to the language to communicate with somebody directly, the translator is more than just a translator. It's also the person that they will mostly face when they talk. It's
Right.
It's your representation.
Correct, yeah. So you need to select ones that with the understanding of the project. When I went to India, I purposefully select a Muslim boy. Because he understands if I make any mistake, he can correct me or guide me through. So it wasn't about what he can do technically at all. It was more about he keeps them comfortable so I can do my work. And the Vietnam work, I had this very young journalist student who was very dynamic. So she could talk to anybody in the streets. So those are the qualities I would look for, nothing else. So it's important your translator understands not to interfere with your work. Because sometimes they carried away, they want to stage things for you, then I'm like, okay, that's not the way I want it. So you have to constantly talk to them. But it is very interesting to work with others.
Other question?
I just have a reference for you. Have you heard Zhang Qianqi?
Yeah, I know.
So I think it's a very interesting comparison between you and his work.
Yeah.
Your point of view is from the bride.
Yeah.
And Zhang Qianqi is from the
What?
The male.
Man.
Yeah. So he's shooting the process of those meeting maybe couple of days.
Yeah.
And you call it competition is so real because there are maybe hundreds of.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Qianqi, I know him very well.
Yeah, and
friends.
it's also in Taiwan there are almost 20% of people that go to those southeastern countries to get married. So now it's a common social issue.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, more common. So in that sense, really, even our dominant culture really need to be more sensitive to these newcomers and their culture that comes with it, because we impose to the children, the Vietnamese or Korean, to learn Korean culture. We impose to these Vietnamese women, do you know how to make kimchi? Do you have to treat your mother-in-law well, and all the Korean culture? But no one asks how they grew up in Vietnam, what is Vietnamese culture? And that attitude has to, in some ways, change a little bit more open to learning the new culture.
Have you think about come to Taiwan to shoot?
I think I'm busy in Korea already. Language barrier. So that will slow me down.
American translate.
Okay. Then I go.
So the Indonesian photographers that you documented there, I actually found it. I mean, it's not that they said things that I don't know, but I found it very sophisticated, their approach to the digital world. I mean, much more sophisticated than some of our esteemed photographers. In fact, we would have been here 10 years ago when we were in the same kind of position. But I would have to say that I would like to see their work. I assume you're going to integrate that into that document.
So
because I think we, as a culture in the West, and the dominant American, European photographic culture, knows almost nothing about that region of the world. And we still know little about probably the history of Korean photography or the history of Indian photography. You mentioned that the other day. I couldn't come up with good references. I had to lead you to someone. I think that research and that exposure is really important in a world of multiculturalism and international exchange. By the way, we hope to do our Still in Moving residency program, perhaps in a year or so, in Singapore, where we can draw these various cultures together one summer. Anyway, I look forward to seeing those works, actually.
Yeah, sure. I hope to get to publish.
You'll find a publisher for that, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Well, your expansive interests, energies, not to mention the fact that she's a remarkable administrator on top of everything else. So, thank you.
Thank you.